It's 3 a.m. when the phone rings in Caracas. Along the Colombian border, Venezuelan mechanized units are receiving movement orders. Satellite imagery shows fuel trucks positioning near forward bases. Artillery batteries are unlimbering. The official statement calls it a defensive readiness exercise, but 3 brigades don't move at night for training. Within 6 hours, the question isn't whether Venezuela intends to fight, it's whether it can. This isn't about ideology or politics. This is a technical question with a technical answer. Could the Venezuelan military sustain combat operations against a peer or near-peer adversary? Could it defend its own territory? Could it project power beyond its borders for more than 72 hours? The answer matters because Venezuela sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves, shares borders with Colombia and Brazil, and remains a point of regional instability. If deterrence fails, the question becomes operational reality. So we examine the machinery of war itself, not the rhetoric, but the metal, the training, the fuel, and the will to use it. Before we assess any military, we need to define the standard. Modern warfare is not about courage or numbers. It's about systems integrating across domains faster than the enemy can respond. Precision weapons don't just hit harder, they eliminate targets in the first hours that would have required weeks of attrition in previous conflicts. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance networks, satellites, drones, signals intercept, create targeting cycles measured in minutes. Joint operations mean air assets enable ground maneuver, which enables naval positioning, all coordinated through digital networks that assume constant communication and real-time data fusion. And behind all of it, logistics. Modern combat consumes ammunition, fuel, and spare parts at rates that strain even wealthy militaries. An armored brigade can burn through its fuel reserves in 2 days of high-tempo operations. Precision munition stockpiles deplete quickly. Electronic warfare systems require constant software updates. This is the baseline. Armies that can't maintain this tempo don't fight modern wars. They endure them, briefly, before systems collapse. The question isn't whether Venezuela has an army. It's whether that army can operate inside this framework long enough to matter. On paper, Venezuela fields a military of approximately 120,000 active personnel, with reserve components theoretically expanding that number significantly. The structure looks conventional: an army, an air force, a navy, and a national guard that blurs the line between military and internal security. The army claims several mechanized and infantry brigades. Inventory lists include Russian-made T-72 main battle tanks, BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles, and BTR-80 armored personnel carriers. Self-propelled artillery and multiple rocket launch systems appear in official parades. The Air Force operates Su-30 flanker fighters, arguably among the most capable platforms in South America. Inventory records show F-16 fighting Falcons, though their status remains questionable following sanctions. Helicopters include Mi-35 attack variants and transport assets. The Navy maintains patrol vessels, submarines, diesel-electric boats of German design, and a modest amphibious capability. Air defense networks incorporate S-300 and SA-6 systems, theoretically providing medium to high altitude coverage. In raw numbers, this resembles a regional military power. The equipment list includes systems that other nations use effectively. The force structure suggests combined arms capability. But numbers on a spreadsheet measure potential, not readiness. And the gap between the two is where most assessments fail. Here's what the inventory doesn't show. Maintenance. Venezuelan military equipment is overwhelmingly Russian or Soviet origin, purchased during periods of high oil revenue. Those purchases occurred years ago. Sanctions, economic collapse, and the breakdown of service contracts mean that spare parts stopped flowing. Russian manufacturers don't provide components for free, and Venezuela's economy can't support procurement at the necessary scale. The result is predictable: cannibalization. Functional systems are stripped to keep fewer platforms operational. For every tank that moves during a parade, several sit immobilized, their parts redistributed. The F-16 fleet is effectively grounded. U.S. sanctions cut off parts and technical support. The aircraft may exist, but they don't fly combat missions. Even the Su-30 fleet, maintained through Russian channels, faces sustainability questions. Flight hours require maintenance hours. Pilots need training sorties. When economic constraints reduce training, readiness degrades. Air defense systems are similar. The S-300 is a capable platform. If its radar systems are maintained, if its missiles are within service life, if its operators train regularly. But these are large ifs. Battery components degrade. Missile stocks have expiration windows. Without sustained investment, even sophisticated systems become static installations. Naval assets face chronic mechanical issues. Submarines require intensive maintenance cycles. Surface vessels need dry dock time. When those cycles are skipped, ships become pier ornaments. The fundamental principle: owning a weapons system is not the same as fielding it. A tank without fuel, parts, or a trained crew is scrap metal with a turret. Equipment can be repaired. Training gaps are harder to fix. Modern militaries train constantly, not just individual soldiers, but units operating together. Combined arms warfare means infantry, armor, artillery, and air support functioning as a synchronized system. That synchronization requires repetition. Tank crews need live-fire ranges. Pilots need flight hours. Infantry battalions need field exercises that integrate with artillery support and close air support. This costs money, fuel, and time. Reports suggest Venezuelan training has declined significantly. Large-scale exercises are rare. Live-fire training consumes ammunition that can't easily be replaced. Flight hours for pilots are limited by maintenance constraints and fuel availability. Officer professionalism is another variable. In functional militaries, officers are promoted based on competence, merit, and professional military education. In politicized militaries, loyalty becomes the primary criterion. When generals are selected for their political reliability rather than operational skill, the entire command structure suffers. Doctrine matters as well. Venezuelan military doctrine historically reflected Soviet influence, emphasis on mass, artillery, and centralized control. Modern doctrine requires decentralized decision-making, networked communications, and rapid adaptation. Transitioning between these models requires institutional change that doesn't happen quickly. The result is a force that may know how to execute set-piece operations in controlled conditions but struggles with the chaos of actual combat. When communications fail, when units become separated, when the plan breaks down, that's when training depth determines survival. And depth requires investment Venezuela hasn't made. Ammunition, fuel, and food. Battles are dramatic. Logistics are boring. But logistics determine who wins. A single armored brigade in sustained combat can consume hundreds of thousands of liters of fuel per day. Artillery batteries fire through ammunition stocks in hours during high-intensity operations. Soldiers need food, water, medical supplies, and replacement parts for everything from radios to boots. Modern militaries preposition supply dumps, maintain robust transportation networks, and use sophisticated tracking systems to ensure the right supplies reach the right units at the right time. They fail at this regularly, and they have resources Venezuela doesn't. Venezuela's economy has been in freefall. Oil production, the nation's primary revenue source, has declined due to underinvestment and mismanagement. Refineries struggle. Fuel shortages affect civilian life, which means military reserves are limited. Ammunition production is minimal. Venezuela doesn't manufacture most of its weapons systems domestically, which means it can't produce compatible munitions at scale. It relies on imports, but imports require currency, and currency requires a functioning economy. Transportation infrastructure is another vulnerability. Roads, railways, and bridges require maintenance. Fuel trucks, cargo vehicles, and transport aircraft all need parts and fuel themselves. A logistics chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And then there's corruption. In resource-scarce environments, supply chains become targets for theft and black market diversion. When fuel is scarce, it gets siphoned. When spare parts are valuable, they disappear. Corruption isn't unique to Venezuela, but economic stress amplifies it. Most armies don't lose because they were outfought. They lose because they ran out of bullets, fuel, or the means to deliver them. Now we turn to the variable that breaks armies from within. The Venezuelan military is deeply politicized. Senior officers hold government positions. Military loyalty to the regime is rewarded with economic benefits, access to resources, and political power. This creates a system where the armed forces aren't just defending the nation, they're defending their own position within the power structure. That has consequences. When soldiers believe they're fighting for national survival, they endure hardship. When they believe they're fighting to preserve a political elite, motivation becomes conditional. Desertion rates rise. Orders are questioned. Units fragment. Venezuela has already seen defections, officers fleeing the country, soldiers abandoning posts. These aren't isolated incidents. They're indicators of fracture lines within the force structure. Morale also depends on conditions. Soldiers who aren't paid regularly, whose families are suffering economically, who see the gap between their hardship and the privileges of senior commanders, those soldiers don't perform well under stress. Politicization also affects competence. When promotion is based on loyalty rather than skill, the officer corps becomes less capable over time. Generals who excel at political maneuvering don't necessarily excel at operational planning. When the shooting starts, that gap becomes fatal. There's also the question of what the military is actually fighting for. In a defensive war against clear external aggression, motivation can be high. In a conflict perceived as serving narrow political interests, that motivation evaporates. Internal fractures mean that even if the equipment were functional, even if logistics were adequate, the human element remains unstable. And in war, instability spreads. So what happens if Venezuela actually fights? Scenario 1: a short border conflict. Venezuelan units mobilize and cross into disputed territory. The initial hours might look successful: armor advances, artillery fires, infantry moves forward. But within 48 hours, fuel stocks begin running low. Air support is minimal because sortie rates are limited. Precision strikes from the opposing force target command posts and logistics nodes. Communications degrade. Units become isolated. By day 3, the offensive stalls. Resupply fails. Commanders lose contact with higher headquarters. The question shifts from advance to withdrawal. Scenario 2: prolonged conventional war. This is worse. Sustained operations require industrial-scale logistics. Ammunition consumption skyrockets. Casualties need evacuation and treatment. Equipment breaks down faster than maintenance teams can repair it. Within a week, the military is operating on fumes, literally. Fuel shortages ground aircraft. Tanks stop moving. Artillery falls silent. The opposing force doesn't need to destroy the Venezuelan military. They just need to wait for it to collapse under its own logistical weight. Scenario 3: facing a technologically superior opponent. This is the nightmare scenario. An adversary with satellite reconnaissance, drone networks, and precision strike capability identifies Venezuelan positions in real time. Air defense systems are suppressed or destroyed in the opening hours. Command and control nodes are eliminated. Venezuelan forces operate blind, unable to coordinate, unable to respond effectively. Modern warfare is about speed and information dominance. Without those, you're not fighting, you're being hunted. In each scenario, the outcome isn't determined by courage or intent. It's determined by readiness, sustainability, and the ability to operate inside the tempo of modern combat. Venezuela can't. Could Venezuela's military fight a modern war? The answer is yes briefly, and then no. It could mobilize. It could fire weapons. It could hold territory for days, maybe a week. But sustaining combat operations, coordinating joint operations, maintaining logistics under fire, these are beyond current capability. This isn't about the bravery of individual soldiers. It's about systems. An army is a machine, and Venezuela's military machine is degraded. Parts are missing. Fuel is scarce. Training is inadequate. The logistics chain is fragile. And internal cohesion is questionable. In the first 72 hours of conflict, appearances might hold. After that, the facade crumbles. The broader lesson applies beyond Venezuela. Military capability isn't just about hardware. It's about maintenance, training, logistics, and institutional integrity. Nations that neglect these fundamentals don't lose wars dramatically, they lose them inevitably. For Venezuela, the question isn't whether it could start a war. It's whether it could sustain one long enough to achieve any meaningful objective. And the evidence suggests it couldn't. So the deterrent value of the Venezuelan military rests not on its combat power, but on the uncertainty of conflict itself, the hope that no one tests the assumption. Because if they do, the answer will be clear within a week. And that clarity would come at a cost measured in lives, not just equipment. What happens when deterrence is this fragile? That's the question regional powers are quietly calculating right now.